Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our exciting session on the future of schooling, brought to you by a set of incredibly amazing pioneers in the charter school space. I'm Darryl Cobb, president of the Charter School Growth Fund, and thank you for being with us today. I am going to ask our illustrious panelists to introduce themselves, your name, a little bit about your background, so like 30 seconds, and then answer the question, when you think about innovation in schooling, what is one word that describes the future for you? I'll give you all a second to think about that. And we'll go clockwise on my screen. So we'll go Dave and then Karega and then Diane. Please go ahead, Dave.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Dave Levin. I'm the co-founder of KIPP. When I think of the future of schooling, I think of teaching.
Great. Karega, Rausch. I serve students and families as the president and chief executive officer of the National Association of Charter School Authorizers. At NACSA, we advance authorizing, right? So the policies and practices that decide who can open new schools, how they're overseen, what they're expected to accomplish, and who's allowed to continue the privilege of engaging students, so that all students and communities, especially those who have been under-resourced, thrive. I'm super excited to be a part of this incredibly esteemed panel and doing some thinking about what kids and communities aspire to and how we can help them reach those goals. To your question, Darryl, around the one word that describes my vision for the future of schooling, it would be create. And that's because I believe we're not going to be able to regulate or spend our way to a different, better future. We have to create our way towards that tomorrow.
That's
Hi
great.
there. Good to see you, Darryl. I'm Diane Tabner. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Summit Public Schools, which is a charter network. We're having our 20th anniversary here this year, and I've had the privilege to lead for those 20 years. On the side, sort of in the 3 a.m. hour, I do a podcast called Class Disrupted that I co-host with Michael Horn, and also wrote a book called Prepared: What Kids Need for a Fulfilled Life. And my firm belief is, when I think about the one word or phrase, it's learner-centered.
Love it. Love it. Thank you all. So to kick us off, I want to talk a little bit about charter innovation. But we sit here in 2022, and I think if you all have been keeping up on your social media feeds, you'll realize that this is the year that George Jetson is actually born in the comics. So he is born in July of 2022. So the future is here. I'm a kid of the 80s.
That was some deep research, Darryl. I mean,
you like that? You like that? Yeah, I'm a kid of the 80s. So George Jetson was born this year. So we got a few years before the Jetsons actually takes place. But I thought that was a good backdrop for our future of schooling. Over the last 3 decades, there's been a ton of innovation in the charter sector. It's consistent with our original vision of charters as laboratories of innovation. And yet now we stand at a moment coming out of a pandemic, coming out of so many events in our country, that kids and families need us to build upon that base and accelerate innovation. So I have a couple of questions for y'all. We'll kind of go around and I'll call on people, and then we're just going to open it up and have a general conversation. But Diane, I want to start with you. You have been among the pioneers of innovation, not just in the charter school space, but in schooling in general. And I'm curious, where do you find inspiration right now for innovation? And what are you seeing that families and students are demanding from us to innovate around right now?
Well, it's interesting because I think where I find the inspiration is in students and families and learners. I think that when we listen to them, they tell us what they want and what they need. And I think sometimes we have a hard time just responding to that and creating what they're asking for. And so, where I'm finding the inspiration right now is we just completed a really expansive look at all of Summit's alums from the beginning to where we are now. And, what they're telling us is that the things that mattered most for them were their expedition learning experiences, the times when they were in the community, they were doing internships, they were actively engaged, the project-based approach to learning that we took, and the deep relationships they have with their mentors and their, fellow community members, and that we want to build on those things. They're also telling us, quite frankly, that we didn't do enough to prepare them for the real, financial and economic knowledge and skills that they needed to operate in the world, and they wish we would have done more there. And that they want alternative pathways. People are really rethinking the ROI on a 4-year college and what else might be possible and better for some folks, and so they're interested in that as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Diane. Love that you are pulling that directly from what you all are hearing from your students. And some of those themes we're going to get back to. And I want to pivot, Dave, for you. In what part of our work in schooling and thinking about the future do you think, what part of our work, where's there the most room for innovation? Is it in instruction? Is it how we structure the school day? Is it the autonomy we give kids? Where's the place where we just need a truckload of innovation to happen as we move forward?
You might have directed that to me. My internet froze for a second. So the dilemmas of the recorded session. So I got the truckload of innovation at the end. I think I can put it together. Was it directed to me? Was it directed to Karega?
It was directed to you. Just okay. In what area of schooling do you think there's the most room, and where do we need a truckload of innovation? Is it instruction? Is it how we think about the day? Is it autonomy for kids? Where do we need to just make tremendous leaps?
Yes. I mean, I would argue that schooling is fundamentally broken. Yes, period. And I think there's been so much progress across so many different parts of the work, both inside of charters, both inside of traditional districts over the last 30 years. And yet we're hearing from kids and families, we're seeing in basically every measure that school and the needs and desires of kids and families and the needs and desires of the workforce, they're just misaligned, right? It's just so that doesn't mean there's not great innovation happening, inside of any individual school or inside of some of the tech solutions that people are talking about. But I just think we are misaligned. And so, just to build on something that Diane was talking about, people want multiple pathways as if that exists in our society as a whole, as if it's okay, but it really, there is no yet structure for that. So you have many organizations working on upskilling and different types of things, but we don't have an integrated solution, which is why when you asked me at the beginning, what word am I thinking about? I still do think it comes back to what is our vision for teaching, and how does that align to what we want kids to learn? So I think the school day is broken. I think, just what we're asking of teachers is too complicated. I think what we're hearing from our alums aligns with what Diane is saying. Although I will say one caveat to that is I do think while people are rethinking the ROI of a 4-year degree, kids who are leaving K-12 with very strong academic foundations and socially, emotionally prepared for higher ed are not the ones rethinking it. So in these discussions, I think we got to be mindful of are we letting K-12 off the hook for its core job when we talk about innovations in higher ed, and what does that have to look like? Because the career opportunities are still closing the opportunity gap, still a 4-year degree with the right 4-year degree, the right major, all this stuff is still the best opportunity for first-gen low-income kids of color in this country, and that in my view needs to change. We need to have a holistic vision. So I think we're all ripe for innovation. And then I'll close with this one thing. Darryl, you gave me a long time ago one of the best pieces of advice on relationship that I ever heard. And you said, good relationships work because people don't keep score. And what I would hope for the future is that we stop keeping score. It doesn't matter what type of school it is. It doesn't matter what type of organization it is. We all have to come together and make our society a more just society, more equitable society for the young people, because they really don't care. They don't care, what type of school they go to. They just want to go to a good school. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's my thought.
No, that's perfect, Dave. And I think the let's stop keeping score and let's focus on the kids is something that we all should take. Karega, I want to come to you for an authorizing specific question, and then I want to open it up to all of you generally. But Karega, as I was thinking about the authorizing question, again, kid of the 80s, I loved Do the Right Thing as a movie. And one of my favorite characters in Do the Right Thing was Radio Raheem, who had the 5-finger rings, that the battle of love and hate. I feel like in authorizing right now, there's a little bit of a battle between accountability and innovation. So can you talk about that battle that's raging a little bit and where you see the future of authorizing going so that we can have accountability, but also in a way that fosters the innovation that needs to happen in schools?
So I had no idea. Sorry, can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. I had no idea that I was going to get a Do the Right Thing and Radio Raheem reference right in this panel, but that is just making my day, let me tell you. So a couple of thoughts on that question. So first, as I'm listening to Dave and Diane and the incredible schools that they've unleashed, in the space, oftentimes we think about innovation as curricular or instructional, right, or new ways of organizing learning, right, and rightly so. I would also say, though, that one of the most consequential innovations in governance in education in the past few decades is authorizing itself. And that's because, right, when done well, it creates a whole new way of unleashing talented educators to create schools that actually work. And so the governance and oversight structure brought together educator autonomy, equitable access, and school autonomy. Those are critical elements for quality innovation prerequisites in a way that hadn't been balanced before. And we saw this play out right during the pandemic, right? Innovations like small learning communities and a quick shift, right, to online learning were possible because of the autonomy created by the authorizer-school relationship. And so at NACSA, we're seeing, and we've made top priorities in our organization, some of those tensions that you identified, Darryl, right? There are some bright spots, but definitely some areas in need of change. And I think about that in two key spaces. One, the process of evaluating new school proposals. So we really have to rethink how we evaluate new school proposals, because in way too many places, it's become way too standardized and bureaucratic and not open enough to innovation. And if we want new kinds of ways of organizing teaching and learning that communities are demanding, we got to rethink how we evaluate entry into chartering. And so NACSA has developed some recommendations in this space that we're going to be sharing in the next couple of months that we think can be helpful in bridging that divide between accountability and innovation, all right, and making sure that it's not an either or, but a both and. The second area that we think is really important to innovate in this space is how we understand and measure school quality, right? So we have to continue to expect schooling, however organized, to ensure high rates of literacy and numeracy, period, full stop. And there are other things that schools are doing that need to be a part of how we think about quality and accountability. I recently wrote a piece in the 74 Million on 10 lessons that we've learned in expanding definitions of school quality by working with authorizers and others in schools in the field. And one of those points was on our ability to develop the infrastructure to create rigorous and customized measures of quality, school by school, that reflect the unique mission and purpose and outcomes that they're trying to achieve. That we think is going to be a critical innovation in kind of governance reform that will enable us to get more in different kinds of ways of organizing teaching and learning, and in such a way that still maintains the high expectations that communities and families have for their kids.
I love that notion, Karega, that you got to be able to, young people have to be able to read at a high level, write at a high level, and compute at a high level. And there's no substitute for that. And if that's not happening, the school is not doing its fundamental job. But the idea of the measures that go beyond that is not holding Dave's school, which is designed to do one thing with kids, against Diane's school, which is designed to do something else, but taking into account the unique factors that they're bringing to their schools and their communities, and incorporating that into their account. So are they delivering against what they committed they're going to do? That is great. And it looks like we may have lost Karega. At least
he figured, he just said everything he needed to say.
He's like, that's it. I fixed authorizing. Like we're all good
from here.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'll throw this next one out, and either one of you can jump in. And this will be like the end of our kind of a little bit of our look back, and then we'll turn our eyes towards the future life of George Jetson. If there was an area where you can pick, where you said, I wish we would have pushed the boundary more in this area over the last 30 years, or where our greatest missed opportunity was as a movement of charter schools. What do you all think is the area where you wish that we would have put in more innovative and creative energy over the last 30 years? Anybody can go first. Who's got an answer?
I'm happy to answer, Darryl. I'm not a very regretting person. So I don't know that I regret the last 20 years. So might be a little bit more forward thinking. I think where we haven't gone yet is, I think a lot of our innovation in the charter sector has been around, one, just proving that all kids could be prepared at very high levels and could go to college. And people forget that 20 years ago, that wasn't a proven fact. And people,
it was a question. Absolutely.
It was a question mark. So I just always want us to remember that I truly believe the charter movement has led the way on that front. And two, around efficiency in schooling. I mean, schools were like deeply inefficient in a lot of ways. And we really, I do think, pioneered some efficiency there that is beneficial. I think where we haven't really innovated is on how schooling actually works. And it's, reflected in our initial comments, that everything from what does teaching and learning look like, and where does it happen, and what does that look like, and the configuration of the day and the year and all of that. And we have not yet innovated there. And there's a lot of reasons why. And again, I don't have regrets. I just have an expectation that is where we have to go next. And we have to push ourselves to go there next. We can't just stay in the space that we've been in.
I think what Diane said is important and powerful. Like, I do remember, we have, when you think back, KIPP has 280 schools this year. We have, 120,000 kids and 80,000 alums. And so, when I look at what those alums are doing, it's inspiring and it is joyful. And it gives a lot of hope, and that what people did not necessarily think that was doable. But I think teaching is hard. Like, teaching is like one of the hardest professions on the planet. And when I look back, and what I think about is, I think, I think there was so much of what we had to do. We were fighting a fight just to fight the fight, which is why Karega's work is so essential, right? Like if the ultimate struggle is for kids to, you know, find their purpose and their passion and have their identities affirmed and make, you know, the choices for themselves, we have to, any teacher, any school, any district, so much has to go into making that happen for kids and families and with communities. It's always been like a fight just to fight that fight. And when I look back, I think I wish we could have short circuited that in a way that it would have been more together, where like, you know, the name on the, like, I don't know what the right, what is the metaphor? Like the name on the front of the jersey, the back of the jersey, whatever. It was like one team. Like it was like this idea that it's like I think if the pandemic showed us that we are all in the same, like we're, whatever, what's the expression? We're all in the same ocean, but different boats, but we're all in the, like, and I do think so much time has been wasted. And I think this, what you talked about, I would maybe say there's a difference. It's not just accountability and innovation. It's just this idea of like, you know, traditional districts and charters and higher ed and like, we are not in it together yet. And I worry that like 30 years from now, then, I mean, I don't think I'll still be doing it at 82, but like the next generation, if they're still fighting this same fight, then we failed fundamentally. And so I look back and I wonder if we had done things differently 30 years ago, would we be saying something different now? So.
Yeah, but just real quick, one point I wanted to underscore that I think Dave and Diane said really well is, you know, it wasn't too long ago when our country didn't believe that all kids were capable of learning at high levels. And so my reflection on that is in our drive, our right and righteous drive to create the schools of tomorrow, right, that students aspire to. Let's also not forget the innovations of the past that still needs support for growth and replication and expansion.
That's powerful, Karega. That's really powerful. All right. I want to shift us from the past to the future. And I think it's Sky Orbit High, which is the school that George Jetson's daughter goes to in the Jetsons. So as we're progressing to get to Sky Orbit High, like 40 years from now, I'm wondering, and maybe I'll start with you, Dave. When we think about the future of schooling, one of the great things about charters is we've always, as a movement, we've tried to address the trends that parents, communities, and students need and create schools that are responsive to those trends. What are the trends that you're seeing now that you think we need to address so that in 30 years, we have the schools that parents, communities, and students need?
So, I mean, I think there is a real desire among parents, kids, and communities for real choice today, right? And so I think that, you know, the idea that's like this was a straight line school higher ed work, that is no longer how people are thinking about it. And school, so I do think there's an obligation on K-12 to figure out how it authentically, in a way that affirms communities and individual identities, prepares kids to have choice, true choice, post K-12. Because, and I think that includes what Karega is talking about, which is like the highest level of academic preparation, the highest level of joy, and the highest level of identity affirmation, so that you really are, like, for kids who want to go to higher ed, they should be able to go and be fully prepared. For kids who want to pursue on another pathway, they should go because that's a true choice, because they are truly prepared. And that, I think, is what we're hearing from kids and families. That people are much more, they're saying, don't tell us what the right path is, but make sure we're prepared for the path we want to choose. And I think K-12 is falling short on that, in that kids really aren't fully prepared for paths of their choice. So they end up defaulting to a path which they're prepared for, and then we call that a choice, but it's not necessarily a choice because, like, you know, they might have been chosen a different path had they been more fully prepared for that path. So I think that, like, at a high level is what is what we're hearing a lot about, and we're hearing a lot that people want post-secondary to be much more flexible. So the vision of what comes after, how does higher ed work, how is it more affordable? We're hearing a lot of that from our alums.
Dave, I from one of my fellow partners at the Growth Fund used to say, right now, this for our young people after K-12 is like a game of chutes and ladders. And there are a limited number of ladders. And there are, unfortunately, a bunch of chutes that exist right now. And we need to be in the business of collectively, to your point about K-12, higher ed, everybody building more ladders for our young people to get to be who and where they want to be.
Amen. And the biggest, I would argue, and it reflects obviously a large part of where I've spent the last 30 years. One of the biggest shoots is that the right way of saying it? One of the biggest shoots in our kids' lives is their K-12 experience. Yeah. K-12 itself should have no shoots. It should just be one. How many ladders you want to envision? They should all be ladders, not shoots.
Yep. Yeah. Well said. Diane, I would love to hear from you in your school community. What are the trends and things that you're seeing? You mentioned some of them at the outset, but what are some of the things that you think we need to be much more responsive to now as we think about schooling in the future?
Well, first of all, I echo and totally agree with what Dave has shared around real choice, not pretend choice, real choice, and like granular level choices that actually matter to people, not just I can pick a school and that's it. And I have to take everything, from that school. I think the other place, and I do think this is societal. We hear this a lot in the schools that we partner with. People, at the end of the day, what a parent wants, and many of us are parents here, is we want our kids to be happy. We want them to have a good life. And, there's pretty decent clarity around what makes up a good life. You're like financially secure, you have purposeful work, you have a good community, you have relationships, you have the health to go about your daily life. And that's what families are oriented to and what they want out of school. And back to this misalignment, we are not aligned. We're not speaking that language. We are not aligned with that. Mm-hmm. We have one definition of success, one ladder versus looking at those dimensions as I think of them as like dials. Like I might personally want to dial up purposeful work, and I'm willing to dial down, financial what I make in order to do that. And I really want to dial up community or, whatever. Those are very different and personalized for every single family and child. And how do we create opportunities where they can pursue their version of a good life and the pieces that feed into that? And schools are not designed and oriented in that way. We're not speaking that language. Families don't feel like we're preparing. They feel like they're playing a game and that they have to play and, and then they got to do their thing on the side of trying to get what they actually want. School should be the thing that gets them ready for the thing that they want.
Diane, I love the simplicity of there's these 5 things that all parents want. I think as schools, we ought to be helping kids understand that there are 5 things that, maybe the number's 5, maybe the number's more, but we're not helping young people understand those things, right? We're making it, you got to go here to get this. And it is all very functional and not, I think, at that level that you're describing. That what you're trying to get to is to figure out, how do I tune the dials that is ultimately going to bring me the most joy and success in life. Exactly. And here are the things that you need to know about. So love that. Karega, want to come to you. As you hear us talking about schooling that is responding to the needs of parents and communities, how do you think about the role of authorizing in ensuring that a school community, because in that community, there's going to be a bunch of people who want a bunch of different things. And so I think there's always the love, the community wants this. The community is not a monolith. parents are not a monolith, right? They want an array of options. So how do you think about that from an authorizing seat of creating that beautiful array in whatever geographic region that somebody might be authorizing in?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and it's just that, right? Being able to create different kinds of learning opportunities, and enabling different kinds of learning opportunities that can allow students to, find the opportunities that best fit what they're looking for, so that they can live a life of their choosing. One of the things I was thinking about is Diane was talking about happiness, right? And so I'm a dad. I've got a 16 and a 14-year-old. And what I appreciated about how Diane defined happiness is it wasn't a feeling, it was a set of conditions and outcomes, right, that enable you to live a happy life. It reminded me a lot of what my grandparents and my parents, kind of taught me, and that we're trying to instill in our girls. And that's happiness isn't, this kind of altruistic, can do no wrong, give you a hug no matter what you do, right? Happiness and love is, I love you so much, I'm not going to let you fail. I'm going to make sure you have what you need, right, in order, right, to succeed. And it's that kind of ethos that you get when you actually listen to families. And that is the emerging work, right, of authorizing, is how to listen to the incredibly diverse voices that exist in communities, and create and enable the kind of conditions where schools emerge that meet their needs. I would also caution us, because we've seen this happen. What I love about our conversation is we're talking about actual families, right? Families with kids, which is really an important element to engage deeply. And that's because in our work in this space, right, we've learned that there are also a lot of people in communities that purport to speak for families, but actually don't. Or folks who would try to convince us that we can't listen to communities and be focused on rigor and quality. Sometimes the loudest voices in communities don't actually speak for families. And it's really important that we find ways to actually listen and engage in the aspirations of families. And then once we listen, we got to act. We have to be catalysts for the things that we're actually hearing, and building systems to do so. That's kind of the part and parcel work that we're trying to engage at NACSA through our work in, kind of new application processes and expanded ways of understanding school quality, and other kinds of ways of authentically incorporating family and student perspectives into the process. But I really appreciated, Darryl, your point that communities aren't monolithic, and not everybody in communities are on the side of trying to do what's best for kids. And it's in part on us in this space to authentically engage families and listen really well, and then act on what they're asking for.
That is powerful, Karega. And I saw the head nods from Diane and Dave from, I'm sure, battle scars of working in communities and trying to work with families and facing those who purport to be in the community, but do not have kids or young people in the school system. So thank you for raising that, Karega. All right, we've got about 8 minutes left, so probably enough time to get I was like, "Ooh, I'm not going to get to like all of my closeout questions." So I'm gonna choose this one, and then we'll go around, and then we'll close out. The recently released paper calls for a need for student-centered learning. And I think we can all align on that, but it also sounds a lot like personalized learning, which was, a buzzword a decade ago, that was flying around. So as you all think about the difference between student-centered learning and personalized learning, I would love to hear you all think of, or to offer up what needs to be different to make learning truly student-centered as we think about the future of schooling. And anybody can jump in.
I'm happy to jump in, Darryl, because we were probably some of the folks who were driving personalized learning as a concept, and certainly as a term. In some ways, I do think that good student-centered learning is personalized. So there's a truth and a compatibility there. I think that probably the personalized learning that you're referencing and talking about, and that people think about most oftentimes, people think about technology, and certainly technology can play a powerful role. I think the type of personalized learning that I don't like, and I don't think is student-centered, is the type that a lot of people went down these pathways of like just algorithms and like, here, this piece of software tells you exactly what you need to learn next. And it doesn't include the agency of the learner. It doesn't include the building of the skill set sort of around the learning, of knowing when I've learned something, and having the mindsets around my capabilities to learn, and a whole suite of other skills and habits that we know are really meaningful to develop as a full person and as a learner. And so I think that a narrow version of personalized learning misses that. And when you think about a student-centered approach, it's much more holistic and inclusive, and I would say really ensures that the agency of the student is being developed and honored and is driving what they're doing.
Super. Thanks, Diane. Dave or Karega?
Karega, I think you want to go? You want me to go? Whatever you prefer. I mean, I think when I think about student-centered learning, I mean, it's sort of like, and I think, Karega, you talked about this, about things that have existed long before that we need to make sure that we honor and uplift. Is what great teachers did forever. I mean, just remember the single room schoolhouse that was educating kids from grades K all the way through, and you had one teacher, two teachers, and they figured out, and she was almost predominantly, and it was predominantly Black women who figured out how to make it work. And so that's student-centered learning. And I would say there's this intersection in school of 3, 4, 5 Venn diagrams, and those circles are getting more and more defined. But you have the needs of the students, and then you have the needs of the teachers, and you have the institution of school, and then you have families and community. Maybe those are 5 circles. And how do you align those that in the center, the students' needs get met? And I think what we've seen is that as asking more of teachers just doesn't work, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can't just keep making the job of teachers more and more complicated. And as we've done that, the needs of teachers it's become too complicated to match up with what the needs of students are. And so I think we have to try to figure out sort of how do we align what students truly need and want with sort of how the ecosystems in which they live are designed and function, and the people who are in them. So I do think we have to fundamentally rethink how the teaching profession looks if we're going to have I think it's nice to think student-centered, but you can't disconnect the reality that when kids leave home from the age they are school age until they're done with school, the most important person in their life outside their family is tied to school somehow, often their teacher, a coach, somebody, right? And so I do think that is the fundamental redesign as well that New Classrooms paper is calling for. Karega, I think I'll turn it over to you, because I think authorizers have a big part in how we help make all these pieces come together.
Authorizers do. Their policies and practices that enable talented educators to think differently about how those relationships work together. There are some real constraints that exist, both in policy and practice, around, what counts as seat time, right? What counts as credit, right? What counts as a school day, right? What are taxpayers paying for? I mean, those are really important, thorny policy questions that innovation also has to get into, so we can create the ecosystem, right, by which these kind of innovations can emerge.
Yeah. All right, I am getting I'm getting the flag, the virtual flag that usually in a room somebody stands up with the card in the back and it's like 0 minutes, get off stage. I'm getting the virtual version of that. So I just want to take time to thank you all for participating today. More importantly, thank you all for all that you all do for kids and families on an everyday basis. And hopefully this has inspired a few people listening to think more deeply about innovation and about some of the adjustments we need to make and some of the things, Dave, as you and Karega said, some of the things that we need to stand up that are good practices that have been going on for a long time. And we need to make sure that they're centered so that kids can have an education process that is truly putting them at the center and focused on who and what they want to be when they graduate, and ensuring they're prepared for that. So thank you all for the time. Appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thank you.